Dear God, make us masters of ourselves, that we might become the servants of others. Take our minds and think through them. Take our lips and speak through them. Take our hearts and set them on fire. Through Christ. Amen. Today we are invited to a wedding. More accurately, we're invited to a wedding reception. And this reception is a big, big deal. Here's the thing. Something will happen at this reception that could be a major disaster for everyone involved. While we see this all unfold, I'd like us to focus our attention on the servants, on the people who are there to take care for and serve the guests. The thing about these servants is that they will come to know some things that the bride and groom will not know, that the families of the bride and groom will not know, that not even the chief steward, the master of ceremonies, will know. We focus on the servants because it will be important for us to know what the servants know. The wedding and reception take place in the village of Cana in Galilee. Cana is about 10 miles north of Nazareth. Jesus is also invited to this wedding, along with his disciples and also his mother. In the first century, Jewish weddings were especially significant. The ceremony is followed by 7 days of feasting and celebration at the groom's home. You thought weddings were expensive now? There really were back then. This was a community-wide event. Everybody in the village is invited. The wedding and reception celebrate not only the joining together of two people, this is the uniting of two families. And just like us, these families want the ceremony and the wedding feast to be absolutely perfect. We are at the reception, and all of a sudden, the servants start rushing around nervously. We see them having whispered conversations. They look troubled. Obviously, something is wrong. The servants are responsible to serve the wine and to monitor the supply as they go along. They are anxious because they are running out of wine, and the reception is only half over. This is a crisis. Imagine what will happen to them if the heads of the households discover this social disaster. They will blame the servants. The servants will be publicly shamed, summarily dismissed, perhaps physically punished, and certainly no longer employable in this community. Running out of wine at such a momentous event would be a gigantic embarrassment for the families, and the servants are going to shoulder the blame. Jesus' mother sees what is taking place. She perceives the impending debacle and the potential threat for the servants. She takes action. She goes to Jesus and says, "They have no wine." This is an example of layered communication. On the surface, it's a statement about wine. It's an observation, a statement of fact. But underneath it, there's a deeper implication. Jesus' mother knows who Jesus is, even though no one else does. Jesus has not yet launched his public ministry. He has not yet made himself known, but his mother knows that her son could and should help people in need. So when she says they have no wine, she's implying, and you can do something about it. This is the way families talk to one another. In families, we talk via layered communication. So when you come home from a long day and your spouse says, "The garbage can is full," you recognize that this is more than just a simple observation. There's also a directive here. The garbage can is full, and you need to take care of it before you do anything else. The problem we get into is when we do not catch every layer of communication. Jesus gets it immediately. He knows about layered communication, and he understands what his mother is saying. But Jesus is reluctant to take action at this point. For some reason, Jesus does not see this as the moment to launch his public ministry. Perhaps it's because Jesus knows that once the cat is out of the bag, it's not going to be pretty at the end. Jesus has the sense that once it becomes known who he is, once his words, his actions are out there, his life will become conflicted with the Jewish and Roman authorities, and it will not end well. It will end in crucifixion. My hour has not yet come, is what Jesus tells his mother. She persists, however, in believing that Jesus can and should do something about the wine, so she turns to the servants and says, "Do whatever he tells you." Now the servants have learned something. They have come to know something in Mary's injunction to them. They now know that Jesus is their help. They now know that Jesus is the one to look for answers. They now know to trust Jesus and put their confidence in Jesus and have faith in Jesus. And that's all exemplified by simply doing what he tells them to do. Do what he tells you to do is excellent counsel whenever we find ourselves in difficult or troubling circumstances. Jesus tells the servants what to do. There are 6 stone jars for the Jewish rite of purification, and we are told that each of the jars holds 20 to 30 gallons of liquid. Jesus tells the servants, fill them to the brim. So that would be 120 to 180 gallons of water. A gallon of water weighs approximately 8 pounds. Since there's no running water, the servants just can't hook up the hose to the faucet and run it to the jars. They have to go to the well and carry the water back and forth. We don't know how long that was, but it's coming out of the house, going through the courtyard, going to the middle of the village, getting the water, coming all the way back. Now, if you think that a person can carry about 80 pounds of water, 2 5-gallon buckets, maybe, that's a lot, but they're servants. That would mean that they would have to transport 960 to 1,440 pounds of water to fill up the jars. So if it's 2 5-gallon buckets on each trip, that's 96 to 144 trips back and forth to the well. What's the point? This is a big job. It sounds so routine in the scriptures, but when you think about it, these servants have been given an enormous task. Here's the second thing they come to know. When Jesus tells you to do something, it's probably not going to be easy to do. When Jesus tells you to do something, more than likely, it will be a significant challenge. It's because we are often more committed to our own comfort than Jesus is. Jesus doesn't seem to be all that interested in how comfortable we are. Instead, Jesus seems to be more interested in our personal, our spiritual growth. Jesus is interested in increasing our faith through actions. That's what the servants have come to know. Jesus then instructs the servants to draw some water from the jars and take it to the chief steward, who's the master of ceremonies. The chief steward tastes the water that has become wine, and this is the good stuff. The chief steward says to the bridegroom, "Everyone serves the good wine first, then the cheap wine, but you have kept the good wine until now." So the miracle has taken place. This is not a show. This is not a spectacle. This was very quiet, and nobody knows what's going on except the servants. The chief steward praises the bridegroom for intentionally waiting to serve the best wine and surprising the guests with it, but the bridegroom doesn't have a clue what has taken place. There's no reaction from the bridegroom. The chief steward's declaration is not challenged. The bridegroom falsely accepts the chief steward's accolades and servants. He's just sitting there going, "Well, great." The servants who saved the day receive no thanks, no acknowledgement. Here's the third thing they come to know. When Jesus tells them to do something and they do it, it doesn't necessarily lead to praise and acclamation from other people. The servants now know that if they live their lives to please other people, if they live their lives only to have other people appreciate and adore them, if they live their lives to receive rewards and approval, they will be sorely disappointed. Right here and now, Jesus gives them the real reason to live, to please God, to live their lives for an audience of one. Jesus turned the water into wine. This was the first of his signs of who he was and what he was capable of. His glory is revealed. And Jesus' disciples believed in him, but the servants saw what he did. Jesus honors the otherwise easily ignored servants who he makes the only real witnesses to the miracle. All those other people there, but only the servants know where the best wine has come from. Now they know who Jesus is. This is the fourth thing the servants come to know, and it is that Jesus is God's agent, acting on God's behalf. Now they know that it's Jesus who changes things. Now they know that it's Jesus who takes ordinary, everyday stuff like water and transforms it into something extraordinary like the best wine. Now they know that if Jesus can do this with water, he can also do this with people. And now they know that if Jesus can do this with people, he can also do this for groups of people. He can do this for families and cultures and systems and even nations. And now they know, most importantly, that the way to see themselves the way to think of themselves is first and foremost as a servant of Jesus. Now they know that what is really important in this life, what really matters, is to have a sense that I am a servant of Jesus Christ. And now we know it too. Now we know what the servants know.